He was dumped. Again. For the 8th time. The reason was a familiar, bitter refrain that echoed the words of the 7 women who had come before. Jessica had told him that being with Leo was just plain dull, suggesting he ought to take a few pointers from Caleb on how to actually charm a woman. Leo felt the phantom weight of a vast, empty pasture growing on his head as he squeezed his eyes shut. Though Caleb had poached every girlfriend he'd ever had, he managed a calm nod and agreed to the breakup. The moment Jessica was gone, a switch flipped. He grabbed his keys and stormed out, heading straight for Caleb's high-rise apartment downtown. In the gangster movies his dad loved, this kind of betrayal, stealing a friend's girl, was a capital offense. He knew the security code to Caleb's building, a relic from a time before everything fell apart. He strode into the lobby, his mind set on a confrontation, picturing a single, satisfying punch. The main living area was empty, bathed in the soft glow of recessed lighting. The sounds of rhythmic grunting led him toward the bedroom. He pushed the door open and collided with a wall of muscle and heat. Caleb, slick with sweat and wearing nothing at all, had just finished a workout. For a moment, Leo's brain short-circuited. He, who actively avoided even suggestive movie scenes, was now staring at his childhood friend's naked form. A fresh wave of indignation washed over him. It wasn't enough for Caleb to have the looks, the family money, the perfect grades. Now he was sculpting a perfect body, too. Leo's rage finally found its voice, erupting in a raw shout that echoed off the minimalist decor. He called Caleb a treacherous bastard. Caleb calmly wrapped a plush robe around his waist, not even gracing Leo with a glance. He asked what he was doing here, reminding Leo that he was the one who had cut off all contact. The dismissive tone was like gasoline on a fire. Leo surged forward to confront him, only to be reminded of the infuriating physical disparity between them. Caleb towered over him by at least half a foot, a solid wall of genetics and privilege that instantly deflated his aggression. Leo demanded to know what he had ever done to deserve this, to have 8 girlfriends systematically stolen from him. Caleb's gaze was cool as he scanned Leo from head to toe. A small, cold knot formed in Leo's stomach. Caleb pointed out that Leo hadn't come storming over for the previous 7. He asked why this one was different, if Leo had actually liked her. His stare was intense, unnerving. Leo stammered that of course he'd liked every single one of them. Caleb scoffed, remarking on his consistently poor taste in women and suggesting he aim higher. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. To look down on the women he actively pursued and won over, it made no sense. It was as if Caleb was deliberately harvesting every relationship Leo tried to cultivate, just to prove he could. As Caleb moved toward the living room, Leo acted on pure instinct, slamming him against the wall. He warned him, his voice low and shaking, to stay away from his girlfriends from now on. Caleb just laughed, a sound full of arrogant amusement, and asked what Leo could possibly do to him. The truth was, he could do nothing. If he could, this wouldn't have happened 8 times. Reality crashed down, and Leo's grip loosened. His tone softened into a plea. He told Caleb he didn't want to be alone forever, that they were supposed to be friends, and begged him to go find someone else to mess with. Caleb's expression darkened. He questioned where the bravado had gone, the same bravado that had led Leo to block all his numbers without a word of explanation. He accused Leo of wallowing in self-pity after his family's bankruptcy instead of trying to rebuild, wasting his time on a string of meaningless relationships. He asked if Leo felt any shame. Suddenly they weren't talking about girls anymore. Caleb was attacking his character, his ambition, or lack thereof. It was a fight Leo couldn't win. Defeated, he slunk back to his dorm. Ever since his father's company went under in high school, Leo had adopted the man's cynical, defeated attitude. Rebuilding the family fortune felt like a fantasy. But that still didn't give Caleb the right to sabotage his life. The bastard had twisted things around again. News of his latest humiliation spread through Northwood University like wildfire. People started calling him the Hulk, not for his strength, but for how perpetually green he was with cuckoldry. His roommate, Mark, was deeply sympathetic. He tried to console Leo by pointing out that having your girlfriend stolen by Caleb wasn't so shameful. It just proved they had the same taste, which, by a stretch of logic, made Leo a demigod by association. Leo made a half-hearted attempt to kick him. Mark dodged, holding up his hands in surrender, and said he had a brilliant, foolproof plan. If Caleb poached his girlfriends, Leo should just get a boyfriend. It was reverse psychology. Caleb couldn't possibly steal a guy, right? The idea was insane, a page right out of a deranged playbook. But the thought of genuinely messing with Caleb's head was too tempting to resist. Even if he couldn't win, he could at least be a nuisance. Seeing Leo's grin, Mark felt a surge of pride, then posed the critical question. Where, exactly, would they find this fake boyfriend? Leo clapped him on the shoulder, declared that the monumental task was now his responsibility, and promptly fell asleep. Unbelievably, Mark delivered. The next day, he'd arranged a meeting for that evening at a downtown karaoke bar. High on the prospect of revenge, Leo went without a second thought, completely missing the strange, guilty flicker in his roommate's eyes. The guy's name was Trevor. He was the classic all-American jock type, handsome in a rugged, approachable way that was a stark contrast to Caleb's more refined, almost ethereal perfection. Trevor smiled shyly and commented that Leo was different than he'd imagined. Quieter, less hyper. Leo's smile tightened. He figured Mark must have described him as a caffeinated monkey. The whole setup felt suspiciously like a blind date. But it didn't matter, as long as it got under Caleb's skin. Determined to sell the performance, Leo tried to emulate the flirty gestures he'd seen girls use, leaning into Trevor's side. He needed to practice so it looked convincing in front of Caleb. He thought he felt Trevor's body tense up, and was it his imagination, or was the guy's face turning a little red? Before he could process the thought that Trevor might not be straight, the door to their private room burst open. It was Jessica, his most recent ex. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She sputtered his name, asking if he was gay, if their breakup had pushed him over the edge. Leo immediately sprang away from Trevor. But then, just 2 seconds later, Caleb walked in right behind her. Thinking fast, Leo threw himself back against Trevor, wrapping his arm around him. He retorted defensively, asking what was wrong with being gay and declaring that love knows no gender. He accused her of being discriminatory. Jessica quickly backpedaled, a look of profound disgust on her face as she said it was fine, whatever made him happy. Leo risked a glance at Caleb. His face was a thundercloud, darker and more furious than Leo had ever seen it, even angrier than the first time he'd introduced Caleb to a girlfriend. He was staring daggers, as if Leo had just committed some unspeakable heresy. A thrill of victory shot through Leo. He had finally landed a blow. Caleb spat out a single word, pathetic, then turned and stormed out. Jessica hurried after him, calling his name and reminding him it was his birthday. Once they were gone, Leo straightened up, laughing, and clapped Trevor on the arm. He thanked him profusely, promised to buy him dinner sometime, and sauntered back to his dorm humming a cheerful tune. He recounted the victory to Mark, gushing about how satisfying it was to see Caleb so thoroughly enraged. Mark laughed nervously, agreeing that it was great the plan had worked. Leo paused, noticing his roommate's shifty eyes and the sheen of sweat on his forehead. Mark finally confessed. There was something Leo needed to know about Trevor. The guy wasn't just a good actor. He was gay. Genuinely. And he was very interested in Leo, hoping for a second date. It dawned on Leo that Mark hadn't found him an actor. He'd set him up on a real blind date. Mark nodded fearfully. Then, as if sensing imminent danger, he fled the dorm for the night, leaving Leo staring at Trevor's name flashing on his phone screen. He hit the power button, plunging the room into darkness. Later that night, while Leo was in the shower, a frantic knocking echoed from his dorm room door. Thinking it was an emergency, he wrapped a towel around his waist and opened it. Caleb stood there, swaying slightly. He lived off campus, There was no reason for him to be here in the middle of the night. Leo instinctively covered his chest before realizing the absurdity of it. A strong scent of whiskey wafted off Caleb. Leo didn't think he even drank. Had he really been that affected? Caleb demanded to know why he hadn't answered his phone. Leo explained it was off and had been for hours. He added that he was too busy enjoying Caleb's misery to be bothered. Caleb stared at him for a few seconds, and seeing the honesty in his eyes, the sharp anger in his expression seemed to dissolve. He was clearly drunk, stumbling as he tried to walk. Leo reached out to steady him, but Caleb angrily shrugged his hand away. Leo muttered under his breath about how Caleb used to sneak into his bed as a kid and refused to leave. Ignoring him, Caleb sat heavily on Leo's bed. His eyes fell on the worn-out teddy bear propped against the pillows, and his lip curled in disdain. He sneered, asking if Leo was still so childish he needed a toy to sleep. Leo snatched the bear and tossed it onto Mark's bed, claiming it wasn't his. A few seconds of silence passed. Then Caleb spoke, his voice quiet. He said today was his birthday, asking if Leo had forgotten. Leo answered honestly that he hadn't. Caleb then asked where his present was, reminding him of a childhood promise to celebrate every birthday together. Leo shot back, asking if having his ex-girlfriend wasn't enough. The jab was intentional, meant to wound. He added that it was just something stupid he'd said as a kid, and he couldn't believe Caleb had taken it seriously. That did it. A terrifying strength surged through Caleb. He grabbed Leo's wrist, spun him around, and slammed him against the wall. He hissed that Leo was in desperate need of a lesson. Pinning Leo's other hand above his head, Caleb forced him to meet his gaze. Leo's immediate instinct was to flee. There was a dangerous, predatory glint in Caleb's eyes he had never seen before. But Caleb's grip was like iron. Leo watched, mesmerized and terrified, as Caleb's throat worked, his Adam's apple bobbing. He seemed to be fighting a powerful internal battle. His voice came out as a dry rasp. He asked Leo if that other guy was allowed, then was he allowed too? Leo was confused, asking what he meant. Caleb's eyes drifted down to Leo's mouth. He asked if it was really that hard to understand. He wanted him. The words hit Leo like a physical blow. First his girlfriend's, now him. He felt a surge of panic, telling his friend to calm down, that they were both guys. Caleb's grip only tightened. He said he couldn't calm down. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs, a strange heat spreading through his body. He regretted provoking him. In any physical contest, he was hopelessly outmatched. He tried to reason with him, babbling about how it was wrong, a violation of nature. Caleb cut him off, reminding him that he himself had just declared that love has no gender. He asked if Leo had forgotten so quickly. Clicked. This was a test. A twisted, elaborate scheme to see if Leo was actually gay, using himself as bait. Cunning bastard. Seeing Leo's attention drift, Caleb forced his face back around, demanding to know who was better looking, him or Trevor. Honestly, it was Caleb by a landslide. But to maintain his cover, Leo forced himself to say that his new boyfriend was obviously more handsome. Caleb let out a cold, humorless laugh. He knew it was all a charade. Leo, flustered, asked why he was acting so crazy then. Caleb's voice suddenly softened, becoming a raw plea. He called him by his old childhood nickname, telling him not to abandon him for other people. He confessed he couldn't stand seeing Leo with anyone else, admitting that he had used the wrong methods and promised he would never do it again. Before he could finish whatever he was trying to say, the dorm room door was kicked open. It was Mark, back from his self-imposed exile, holding a box of pizza. His triumphant declaration of bringing a peace offering died on his lips as he took in the scene. Leo, clad only in a towel, pinned against the wall by Caleb. Mark's expression cycled rapidly from shock to understanding. He slowly set the pizza down, grabbed the doorknob, and promised to leave them to it. With a surge of adrenaline, Leo shoved Caleb to the floor and dragged Mark back into the room. refusing to let him leave and spread rumors. After dealing with his roommate, he turned back to find Caleb already asleep on his bed, completely unresponsive. He had to be faking it. Mark looked at Leo, then cautiously slid into his own bunk, pulling the covers up to his chin. He suggested they just squeeze in together. Leo refused to sleep with another man. With a sigh of resignation, he pushed Caleb further to one side, making just enough room for himself. He wondered why, of all the kids in their kindergarten class, he had to become friends with this one. Mark's voice floated down from the top bunk, asking how two people with such wildly different personalities ever became friends in the first place. Leo muttered that they weren't friends anymore. That's why they'd had a falling out. The real reason for the falling out, and why Caleb targeted only his girlfriends, remained a mystery. He supposed Caleb was just bored. Thinking back, Caleb had always been incredibly good to him. Despite being the same age, he had cared for Leo like a doting older brother. The best snacks, the newest gadgets, Caleb always shared with him first. When they got into fights, Caleb always shielded him, taking the full blame when they were caught. His own mother used to joke that with Caleb around, she never had to worry about her son being taken care of. Leo had assumed they would be like that forever. Then his family's business collapsed in high school, and he began to distance himself. His father had drilled into him that in the world of the wealthy, relationships were transactional. Once your value was gone, so were your friends. He assumed Caleb felt the same way, so when Caleb sensed his withdrawal, he turned hostile. Leo remembered one time when he'd refused to meet. Caleb had cornered him at school, shoving him into a bathroom stall. He'd grabbed him by the collar, his eyes burning with a look so intense it felt like he wanted to devour him whole. Caleb had snarled that he didn't want to be his damn best friend anymore. In that moment, Leo believed his father's words completely. Caleb had never been a true friend. All the kindness had been a sham. He'd pushed him away, yelling that the feeling was mutual, that he'd been faking their friendship on his father's orders, and now that the money was gone, he didn't have to pretend anymore. That was the day everything between them shattered. Leo threw himself into dating, a normal teenage distraction. He wasn't Caleb-level handsome, but he was cute enough, and he never had trouble finding a girlfriend. The problem was, he could never get as far as holding a girl's hand before Caleb swooped in and stole her away. A month after their big fight, Caleb had shown up outside his apartment, his eyes red and bloodshot. A flicker of concern softened Leo's resolve. He'd asked him what was wrong. Caleb's gaze had locked on the girl standing behind Leo, and his voice was thick with a sense of betrayal. He'd asked if this was why Leo had blocked him, just so he could date. He'd said that even a block of wood would have developed feelings after all those years. So how could Leo be so heartless? How could it be that Caleb's presence or absence meant nothing to him? Leo's mind flashed back to the day he'd been turned away from Caleb's mansion, and the pretty girl he'd seen inside with him. He'd spat back defensively, telling Caleb to leave him alone and never come back. The truth was, he went inside and cried into his pillow for hours. How could a decade of friendship just vanish? But if it had all been a lie, there was no point in holding on. The next morning, Caleb was gone. Leo opened his phone, found the unknown number he knew belonged to Caleb, and saved it under his name. A message notification from Trevor popped up, asking if the guy from the other night was his real boyfriend and if they could meet up to talk. Leo didn't dare reply. He also found it slightly baffling that Trevor couldn't even figure out who he was actually dating. The weather was getting warmer. Leo put on a t-shirt. Mark, mid-bite of his breakfast, glanced up and his jaw dropped. He exclaimed that Leo had found a new girlfriend already. Confused, Leo followed Mark to the mirror. There, stark against the skin of his neck, was a dark, bruise-like mark. A hickey. It had to be Caleb. That son of a bitch. He had graciously let him stay, and this was how he was repaid. It explained the strange, biting sensation he'd vaguely remembered from the middle of the night. Disgusted, he tried to scrub it off. He grabbed a jacket to cover the mark and went to find Caleb. Just outside the campus gates, at a classic breakfast diner, he saw Caleb breaking up with Jessica. It seemed rushed. Leo wondered if Caleb was already moving on to Trevor. He quickly pulled out his phone and texted Trevor frantic that Caleb was mentally unstable and on a rampage, and that he should hide out on campus. Trevor, sufficiently terrified, promised he would. Jessica was pleading, but Caleb was unmoved. The guy was a total player, chasing girls only to discard them. Leo felt a pang of sympathy for Jessica. She was one of the campus beauties, and he'd worked hard to win her over. He sighed with regret, stepping a little too close to the drama. Both Caleb and Jessica noticed him at the same time. He quickly explained he was just passing by. But Jessica's frustration had found a new target. She grabbed a glass soda bottle and stalked toward him, her face a mask of fury. She screamed that it was his fault Caleb was breaking up with her and that he should just die. She raised the bottle to smash it over his head. In a blur of motion, Caleb threw himself in front of Leo. The bottle shattered against Caleb's forehead. Sticky liquid exploded over both of them. Caleb grunted in pain, his voice low as he asked Leo if any of the glass had hit him. Leo was stunned. They had betrayed him, yet here was Caleb bleeding to protect him, and Jessica trying to murder him. A white-hot anger flared in his chest. Seeing Leo was unharmed, Jessica, undeterred, reached for another bottle. This time, Leo was faster. He snatched it and smashed it hard on the ground at her feet. Shards of glass flew everywhere. Jessica screamed and shielded her head. Before she could react, Leo grabbed another bottle. Caleb caught his arm, telling him to calm down. Leo lowered the bottle, his gaze cold as he looked at the trembling girl on the ground. He asked her, his voice dangerously quiet, if she wanted to try again. Jessica didn't dare look up. She scrambled to her feet and ran away, sobbing. He took Caleb to the student health center. After the wound was cleaned, it was clear he needed stitches. Leo asked if it hurt, if he was worried about a scar. Caleb just looked at him and asked if he would mind if his partner had a scar. Leo shook his head, saying that if you really liked someone, things like that didn't matter. Caleb's gaze was intense, almost hypnotic. He said it had been a long time since he'd been this close to him. Leo told him he should probably get his head checked for a concussion, too. After Caleb got a tetanus shot, Leo took him back to his apartment. He was about to leave when Caleb grabbed his arm, pointing out that his clothes were still soaked and sticky. He was right. Caleb found a clean white t-shirt and sweats for him. Leo headed toward the bedroom to change, but Caleb steered him toward the bathroom, suggesting he shower first. The soda had stained his clothes, and Caleb's were expensive. When he came out, he found Caleb staring intently at his phone, the tips of his ears slightly pink. Leo crept up behind him, expecting to see some racy video, but the screen showed an old photo of him in his swim trunks from their high school team. It was profoundly weird. A guy looking at another guy's swimsuit picture and blushing. Creep. Caleb snatched Leo's phone from his pocket, expertly typed in the passcode, and after a few quick taps, handed it back. He had deleted all of Leo's recent selfies from his social media. The smug look on Caleb's face suggested it was something he'd been wanting to do for a long time. Leo asked if he was afraid his good looks were a threat. Caleb replied that he was tired of dealing with all the people Leo attracted. That dangerous feeling was back. Leo didn't dare ask about the hickey, afraid of what Caleb might do. But Caleb's eyes drifted to his neck. He said quietly that Leo shouldn't go back to the dorm, that the bed was too small. Leo retorted that it was perfectly fine for one person. Caleb added, "And what about him?" Leo snapped that if he said one more thing like that, he would run him over with his car. Caleb fell silent. As Leo left, Caleb gave him a knowing look, as if he was certain he would be back. Back at the dorm, Mark was watching an action movie. Leo nodded in approval. This was what normal guys did. No one stared at their friends' swimming photos. Seeing him, Mark quickly closed his laptop. He asked Leo if he thought Caleb was a little strange. Leo fired back that Mark, who didn't even watch action movies, was the strange one. Mark, while gaming, asked if the mark on his neck was from Caleb. He claimed everyone knew since they had woken up with it. He then asked, almost casually, if maybe the reason Caleb always stole his girlfriends was because he was actually in love with him. He didn't look up to see the look of stunned disbelief on Leo's face. He just continued, asking if Leo liked him back. Leo exploded, asking if he was crazy. Caleb couldn't possibly like him. He hated him. The hickey was just a way to sabotage things with Trevor. He remembered Caleb had a childhood friend, a petite, adorable girl he was probably set to marry one day. He figured everyone else was just a temporary distraction. Thinking about it left a strange, unpleasant feeling in his gut. That night, he couldn't sleep. Caleb's face kept flashing in his mind. He got up for a drink of water and then realized what was wrong. His teddy bear was gone. He couldn't sleep without it. He frantically shook Mark awake. Mark mumbled groggily that Caleb had taken it, claiming it was a birthday present from Leo. That damn thing hadn't been washed in weeks. Leo grabbed his jacket and stormed back to Caleb's apartment. He burst in, demanding to know why Caleb had to steal everything from him. Caleb, lying in bed, looked at him lazily. He gave him a choice: his girlfriends or the bear. Of course, the girlfriends were more important. But the feeling of being unable to sleep was torture. Habits were hard to break. Caleb saw his dilemma. He patted the empty space next to him on the bed and told Leo that if he begged, he could sleep there. It was a perfect solution, and it wasn't like he hadn't begged before. Gritting his teeth, Leo asked him to let him sleep there. Caleb nodded with satisfaction and placed the teddy bear between them as a barrier. Leo quickly got into bed, asking if Caleb would keep his word and stop stealing his girlfriends. Caleb promised he wouldn't. As sleep began to claim him, he thought he heard Caleb say something else. Caleb asked if he had been angry earlier because he'd gotten hurt. Leo drowsily asked why Caleb had shielded him from the bottle. Caleb's answer was soft. He had promised to protect him. A childhood promise he shouldn't have taken seriously. Their circumstances were different now. Caleb insisted that to him, Leo was still Leo. But Leo knew he wasn't the same. The huge gap between their lives after his family's bankruptcy was something he could never get used to. He couldn't afford the things they used to do. Caleb could treat him to fine dining, but Leo couldn't even buy him a decent meal in return. Whenever they went shopping, Caleb would buy anything Leo looked at for more than a few seconds and give it to him later as a gift. It made him feel like a charity case. Their lives had diverged too much. The last time he had gone to Caleb's house, the housekeeper had blocked the door, saying Caleb was studying. Through the gap in the door, Leo saw him playing on a new gaming console with that same pretty girl from his memories. They were childhood sweethearts from the same world. He was just a broke kid from a bankrupt family. That night, Leo dreamed he was a child again. A beautiful, quiet boy had moved in next door. One day, Leo tried to tease him with a dog, but the dog went wild and bit him. Caleb, who had already run a safe distance away, came sprinting back. He grabbed a thick branch and fought the dog off. In the end, Leo was safe, but Caleb's leg was badly bitten and needed stitches. When Leo's parents took him to apologize, he'd cried and grabbed Caleb's hand, begging him not to die and promising to stop bothering him. Caleb had shaken his head and said he wouldn't die, that he liked it when Leo came to play, and promised he would always protect him. He'd kept that promise for so long. Leo, on the other hand, had never kept his. He woke up hot and sweating just before dawn. Caleb's arm was draped over him. He carefully tried to move it, but Caleb woke instantly. He asked where he was going. Leo said he had to use the bathroom. Caleb sat up and said they'd go together. He was starting to get on Leo's last nerve. Caleb got out of bed, slung Leo over his shoulder, and carried him to the bathroom. He complained he couldn't sleep. He was afraid Leo would run away again. He explained that in the first year after they stopped talking, he hadn't slept a full night, terrified Leo's family would move away and he'd never find him again. The memory of Mark's words about Caleb liking him resurfaced. The atmosphere grew heavy. Leo joked nervously, asking if Caleb had a secret crush on him. Caleb didn't deny it. He just stared at him, his gaze open and intense. Unsettled, Leo shifted away. Caleb simply removed the teddy bear that separated them. He asked why Leo had blocked him. Leo shot back that Caleb was the one who said he didn't want to be friends anymore. Caleb's voice was low and serious. "Because I want to be your man." He leaned in and kissed him. Leo was too stunned to react. By the time his brain rebooted, Caleb had pulled away. Kissing his best friend felt electric, tingling. Caleb called him a blockhead for not being able to understand a confession. Leo sputtered that no one could understand that, asking why he couldn't just be direct. "Fine," Caleb said. "I like you. Do you like me?" "No." "Don't answer yet," Caleb murmured. "Sleep on it." He moved to kiss him again. Leo panicked, threatening him with his stitched-up forehead, asking if he wanted a permanent scar. Caleb simply said that everything he had was already his. He looked into Leo's dazed eyes and asked him to feel his own heartbeat, asking if he could honestly say he didn't want him. In that moment, Leo's defenses crumbled. He surged forward and kissed Caleb himself, his voice a rough whisper. He told Caleb to listen carefully. This was his first time, and he was absolutely not going to be on the bottom. Caleb agreed. Whatever he wanted. The next morning, Leo's back felt like it was broken. He spent 2 days skipping classes to recover before finally dragging himself back to campus. He ran into Mark in the cafeteria, who slapped him on the back so hard he almost fell over. He turned to retaliate and saw Trevor standing behind Mark, smiling at him. Mark reminded him that he had promised Trevor dinner. He owed the guy. During the meal, Trevor was easy to talk to, listening patiently even when Leo was rambling. Mark made an excuse and left them alone. Leo felt awkward, but he received a constant stream of frantic texts from Caleb, demanding to know who he was with and why he was smiling at him. After he sent Trevor on his way, Caleb materialized at his dorm. Leo explained everything, and Caleb's anger subsided, replaced by a demand to know when Leo would make their relationship official. Leo told him they should wait until after graduation. Caleb's face fell. He looked insecure, asking if Leo was afraid of being left. Leo smiled and kissed him. The dorm bed was too small. Caleb hit his head, then pushed Leo down, pressing his full weight on him. Leo protested that it was the middle of the day. Mark could come back anytime. Caleb said he would lock the door. Leo pointed out that 2 guys locking the door would be even more suspicious. Caleb suggested they go to his place. Now, he leaned in to kiss him again. Suddenly, the door was kicked open by Mark. Leo shoved Caleb off the bed. Seeing Caleb on the floor, Mark looked shocked, asking if they were fighting. Caleb rose, a slow, predatory smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. He looked like he was about to murder someone. Mark yelped, dropped what he was holding, and fled. Later, after Caleb had left, Mark crept back into the room, asking what he had ever done to offend him. He begged Leo not to let Caleb come to the dorm anymore, for the sake of his own life. Caleb's appetite was insatiable. To spare Mark any more trauma, Leo moved in with him for the summer. For the first 2 weeks, they barely left the apartment. Leo was exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He begged Caleb for a break, telling him he was going to end up in the hospital. Caleb reluctantly let him go and took a long, cold shower. One evening, Caleb was finally calm, and Leo got a full night of restful sleep. The teddy bear had been kicked off the bed. He wasn't sure when he'd outgrown the need for it. Probably after he and Caleb got together. The habit had only started because of the lonely, tearful nights after their friendship had ended. Maybe he'd liked him even back then, and had just been too clueless to admit it. One afternoon, Caleb took him out for lunch. While in the restroom, Leo ran into Jessica. She glared at him, saying she knew they were together. He suspected she'd been spying on them. She told him he was disgusting and asked if he really thought Caleb's parents would ever accept him. It was a question he hadn't considered. She sneered that he would become nothing but a parasite, that since his family lost their money, he was worthless. Leo calmly washed his hands, looking at her in the mirror. He told her it was because Caleb loved him, and because he was willing. If she didn't believe it, she could go try to win him back and see what happened. As he turned to leave, she grabbed his arm. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. She was pregnant. It was Caleb's. Leo was silent for a moment, then slowly pulled his arm free. She added that she had already spoken to Caleb's parents, and they had given their approval. All that was left was for Leo to step aside. He asked to see the ultrasound. Jessica's confident act faltered. She stammered that no one carries that around. Leo told her he didn't believe her. Caleb had never so much as touched the 7 girls before her. What made her so special? He warned her to stay away from both of them. He had nothing left to lose, and she didn't want to see what happened when he was pushed too far. Jessica left in a huff. After lunch, back at the apartment, Caleb got a phone call. He took it on the balcony out of earshot. Leo had a good idea who it was. When Caleb came back inside, his face was grim. He said he had to go out for a bit and told Leo to wait for him. Caleb didn't come back that night. The next morning, as Leo was having breakfast, the front door opened. It was Caleb's father. He smiled when he saw Leo, remarking that it had been a long time. He sat on the sofa and explained that his son was stubborn, and he needed Leo's help to convince him to move back home. He said he didn't want his only son to go down the wrong path. Leo tried to say he couldn't influence him, but Caleb's father cut him off. He reminded Leo that his family had helped them significantly after their business failed, and now it was time for Leo to repay that kindness, not encourage Caleb's rebellion. He subtly threatened that if Leo didn't comply, his family could suffer consequences. He asked if Leo wanted his parents to go through that kind of hardship again. He was right. Caleb's family had provided a safety net, and Leo, even now, was dependent. He couldn't even pay for his own half of their dates. All of Caleb's money came from his family. They had no power to fight them. Before leaving, Caleb's father placed a check on the table, saying it was to help with his school expenses and to give his regards to his parents. The message was clear: take the money and get out. Caleb came home that evening looking exhausted. Leo hugged him, then said he hadn't seen his own parents in a while and should go home. Caleb offered to go with him, but Leo refused, saying it was a family matter. Caleb looked hurt, asking if he was considered an outsider. That night, Leo couldn't sleep. The next morning, while Caleb was still asleep, he packed his few belongings and left. 2 weeks later, Caleb showed up at his parents' apartment. He asked why Leo wasn't answering his phone, why he hadn't come back as promised. Leo pulled him outside, away from his parents' view. He said flatly that he wasn't interested anymore. He told Caleb he was straight, and this had all just been a phase. He knew he was being cruel, but it was the only way. Caleb's voice was pleading. He begged Leo not to leave him again like he did before. Leo pulled his hand away, went back inside, and shut the door. Then he blocked Caleb's number. Again. He remembered Caleb once asking him if he would ever block him again. Leo had promised he wouldn't. Caleb had said that if it ever happened, he wouldn't chase him. He would just assume he wasn't good enough and would work tirelessly to become better, to build a future for them. And Caleb kept his word. He never called, never showed up again. Years passed. Leo's father, after a period of aimlessness, opened a small restaurant. He was a great cook, and the place slowly became a local favorite, then a viral sensation. Leo helped out after his day job. His life settled into a routine. The company he worked for was acquired, and a new CEO was coming in. Rumors of layoffs circulated. Leo figured if he got fired, he could just work at the restaurant full-time. Instead, his first notice from the new management was a promotion. He was summoned to the CEO's office. The new boss was Caleb. He sat behind a massive desk, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, looking every bit the powerful executive. Leo was so shocked he forgot to speak. Caleb didn't even look up, just continued signing documents. Leo was forced to stand there for the entire afternoon. It was pure, petty revenge. The next day, he was called in again. This time, Caleb told him to wait on the sofa, occasionally glancing over at him as if inspecting a curious antique. Leo couldn't take it anymore. He slammed his hand on the desk and said he quit. Caleb finally looked at him properly. He asked who would pay Leo's $5,000 mortgage payment every month. Leo deflated. Caleb leaned back in his chair and told him what he wanted. Seduce him. If he did, maybe Caleb would consider making his life easier. Leo asked if he was sick. Caleb just smiled, saying he knew Leo had never forgotten him. Then he leaned across the desk, his voice dropping. He asked if Leo had missed him. Leo turned away, refusing to answer. Caleb was called away on an urgent matter before he could press further. A few days later, Caleb was away on a business trip. Leo overheard the receptionists gossiping about the new CEO having a fiancée, his childhood sweetheart. The image of the petite girl from Caleb's house flashed in his mind. It made sense. They were a perfect match. That night at the restaurant, he was distracted, breaking plates and mixing up orders. His mom sent him home. The walk was short, but he felt a tightness in his chest. As he neared his building, he noticed the same black sedan that had been parking on his street every night for years suddenly flash its lights. He walked over, curious. The door opened, and Caleb got out. He had been there all along, watching over him. Caleb told him that he was powerful enough now. No one could stand in their way anymore. He asked if Leo could finally accept him. In that moment, Leo knew with absolute clarity that he didn't want to lose him. He ran and threw his arms around him, whispering that he loved him. Caleb's response was a cascade of "I love you too." Later that night, Leo asked about his fiancée. Caleb explained that was just a rumor he had started himself to ward off advances from women at the company who might become rivals for Leo's affection. As for his parents, he said he was an adult now. They couldn't control him. He knew Leo had only broken up with him because of his father's threats. But now he had the power to protect them both. At Thanksgiving, Leo brought Caleb home to meet his parents and told them everything. To his shock, they agreed. They acted as if they'd known all along. His mom explained that they had heard him crying himself to sleep every night for months after the breakup. She said the reason she told their nosy neighbor they were waiting was because she was waiting for Caleb to come back. On New Year's Eve, Caleb was at their house. He held Leo by the window, looking out at the city lights. He bit his shoulder gently and warned him that if he ever dared to block him again, he would lock him up and never let him go. Leo laughed, promising he wouldn't. He never would again.